If you drag him out, you may be dragging out the truth with him. Thomas Carter's voice was low, almost swallowed by the hiss of the automatic ER doors, as two hospital security guards hauled him backward across the white tile. His denim jacket twisted under Marvin Cole's fist. Beside the billing counter, 9-year-old Grace tore open a sealed white envelope with the hospital logo stamped in blue. Daniel Mercer stepped forward, hand raised, smile tight. That is internal correspondence. Grace looked at the first line and whispered, "Daddy, it says room 314. 3 hours earlier." The envelope had been sitting on the passenger seat of Thomas's old pickup like something alive. It did not belong there, not among the socket wrenches, the paper coffee cup, and the small toolbox that smelled faintly of machine oil and disinfectant. The handwriting on the front was thin but deliberate. For Thomas Carter, read before they remove him. Thomas had read those words 6 times before starting the engine. He had not opened it. Not yet. Some promises were heavy enough unopened. Grace sat beside him with her knees tucked under a faded pink coat, watching rain crawl down the windshield in crooked lines. "Is it from the doctor lady?" she asked. Thomas kept both hands on the wheel. "Dr. Evelyn Hart," he said. "She helped kids. Did she help Mom?" The wipers dragged across the glass. For 1 second, the road blurred, not from rain. Thomas looked at the small hospital tag clipped inside his notebook, the one with his wife's name faded almost gray at the edges. "She tried to tell the truth," he said. That was all he trusted himself to say. St. Bartholomew Medical Center rose out of the wet afternoon like a block of polished stone and glass. All clean windows, bright flags, and signs promising care with compassion. Thomas parked in the visitor lot far from the entrance because he still counted dollars like bolts in a tray. Before they went inside, he pulled a clean towel from his toolbox and folded it twice out of habit. Grace noticed. "For who?" "For whoever needs it," he said. The ER lobby smelled of floor cleaner, coffee, and anxious breath. A television murmured above rows of plastic chairs. Somewhere behind the double doors, a monitor beeped in a steady, fragile rhythm. Thomas walked to the nurse's desk and asked for Helen Moore. He did not raise his voice. He did not say lawsuit. He placed only the sealed envelope on the counter. Patricia Voss looked at his jacket first, then at his boots, then at the name on the envelope. Her expression cooled by degrees. "Sir, you're not authorized to request patient information." "I'm not asking for patient information," Thomas said. "I was asked to come." Patricia tapped her tablet. A red banner flashed. Grace saw it before Thomas did. Disruptive Family Contact Carter Case. Patricia's finger froze a fraction too long over the screen. Behind them, Daniel Mercer entered through a side hallway, adjusting his cufflinks as if arriving for a meeting already under control. His smile was soft, professional, almost kind. "Mr. Carter," he said, before Thomas had given his name. And that was the first thing that made Helen Moore, standing near the ER doors, turn her head. Helen Moore turned her head not because she trusted Thomas Carter, but because Daniel Mercer had spoken his name too quickly, too smoothly, like a man answering a question before it had been asked. The fluorescent lights above the ER doors flickered once, washing the lobby in a pale white shiver. Patricia Voss kept her finger near the red banner on the tablet. Disruptive Family Contact Carter Case. Grace read the words silently, then looked up at her father as if a stranger had written a cruel name over the man who packed her lunch every morning. "That flag is outdated," Thomas said quietly. "That flag is active," Patricia answered. "Please step back." Marvin Cole moved closer, his black security badge catching the light against his chest. He was not shouting. That made it worse. His voice had the calm weight of someone used to moving people without ever calling it force. "Sir, we have protocols for families with a history of escalation." Thomas looked down at Grace before he looked at Marvin. His hand opened, slow and empty, showing he was holding nothing but the sealed envelope and his small notebook. "My daughter doesn't need to hear me called dangerous," he said. Patricia's mouth tightened, not with guilt, but with inconvenience. A man in a gray sweatshirt stopped filling out a form. An older woman in the waiting chairs lowered her magazine. Somewhere behind the glass, a child coughed, and the sound seemed too small for the size of the room. Patricia turned the tablet just enough so Mercer could see it, but not Thomas. Mr. Carter previously filed multiple complaints after a family loss, she said, each word polished clean of compassion. He attempted to challenge medication documentation and equipment records. My wife died here, Thomas said. I asked why. You accused staff, Patricia replied. I asked why, he repeated, softer this time. Grace's fingers found the corner of his denim jacket and held it. Thomas felt her trembling through the old fabric. He bent slightly, not enough to look weak, just enough to be her shelter in a room that had suddenly become full of eyes. From inside his notebook, the old hospital tag slipped halfway out, its plastic edge clouded with age, the printed name faded almost gray. Helen Moore saw it. Her face did not soften. It sharpened. The tag belonged to another time, another chart, another night the hospital had buried beneath clean language. Mr. Carter, Helen said, stepping one pace closer. Pain doesn't prove a chart wrong. Thomas nodded once. No, ma'am. And grief doesn't give access to patients. No, ma'am. Then why are you here? The question landed cleanly, and for one breath even Mercer let the silence sit. Thomas did not reach for the tag. He did not point to the envelope like a weapon. He only placed the notebook flat on the counter, beside Grace's dropped pencil, and slid the pencil back into his daughter's hand. Because Dr. Evelyn Hart asked me to come, he said. Mercer's smile returned too quickly. Dr. Hart was under tremendous strain near the end. Any personal correspondence should be reviewed privately, not used to alarm families in an emergency department. He said it gently, almost kindly, and several people in the lobby seemed relieved to hear a professional voice put the chaos back into a box. Patricia exhaled through her nose and tapped the tablet again. This is the pump complaint family, she muttered, not quite low enough. Helen's eyes moved from Patricia to Thomas, then down to the old hospital tag resting inside the notebook. Thomas had not said pump. Grace had not said pump. The envelope had not been fully read. Yet the word hung there beneath the buzzing lights, small and cold, like a key turning in a lock no one wanted opened. The word pump did not echo loudly, but it changed the air. Thomas felt it move through the lobby the way cold moves under a door, quiet and impossible to ignore. Patricia Voss looked down at her tablet as if the screen had betrayed her. Daniel Mercer's smile stayed in place, but his eyes went to the envelope again, then to the notebook, then to Helen Moore. A family complaint, he said gently. Nothing more. Thomas did not answer. He was watching the hallway behind the ER doors, where a nurse pushed a small boy in a wheelchair past the glass. The boy was 7, maybe 8, with a blanket tucked around his knees and a plastic wristband flashing yellow beneath the sleeve of his hospital gown. His mother walked beside him with one hand on his shoulder and the other gripping a paper cup that had gone soft from being squeezed too hard. The boy's lips were pale. His breathing came fast, shallow, like each breath had to climb over something. Thomas knew that sound. Not as a doctor, not as a hero, as a father who had listened beside too many machines and learned that fear had a rhythm. Helen, he said, still low. Marvin Cole tightened his grip on Thomas's arm. Do not address staff directly. Thomas did not pull away. Please look at that child's wristband. Patricia gave a small, tired laugh. Mr. Carter, this is exactly the behavior noted in your file. Look at the band, Thomas said. Grace followed her father's eyes. She saw the boy, saw the yellow strip, saw the way his mother kept smoothing his hair though the child was sweating. Grace did not understand medication charts or hospital policy, but she understood scared mothers. She reached into Thomas's open toolbox, the one Marvin had made him set on the floor, and pulled out the clean towel. He had folded in the truck. Can I give it to her? She whispered. Thomas nodded once. Walk, don't run. Grace crossed the few feet between them carefully, holding the towel with both hands like it was something fragile. Ma'am, she said in a small voice. My dad says this is clean. The mother looked startled, then grateful in the exhausted way people look when kindness arrives too quietly to question. She pressed the towel to her son's forehead. Thomas stayed where he was, one hand visible, one arm still under Marvin's hold. "Sit him up a little," Thomas said. "Loosen the collar. Don't give him anything else until the nurse checks that band." Helen had already moved. Not quickly enough to look panicked, but no longer slowly enough to look dismissive. She bent beside the wheelchair and turned the boy's wrist, reading the yellow allergy band. A green medication sticker had been slapped onto the temporary chart clipped to the chair. Green meant cleared. Yellow meant caution. Two colors, side by side, telling two different stories. Mercer stepped forward. "Room 314 has already been cleared." Helen looked up. "I didn't say he was from room 314. The lobby seemed to narrow around that sentence. Thomas felt Grace slip back to his side and press her shoulder against his leg. He wanted to pick her up the way he had when she was little, carry her out of this bright, cruel room, take her somewhere that smelled like rain and pancakes instead of bleach and fear. Rent was due Friday. His last repair invoice was still unpaid. His daughter should have been home doing spelling words, not standing under hospital lights while strangers decided whether her father was dangerous. But the boy in the wheelchair was still breathing, and that meant there was still time. Thomas opened his notebook with 2 fingers and turned to the page where his wife's hospital tag lay tucked under a pencil line. He did not lift the tag. He only looked at the old numbers, then at the boy's wristband. "P314, he said quietly. Helen's hand stilled on the chart. Grace looked down at the sealed envelope, now creased from her grip, and for the first time Helen Moore looked at Thomas Carter not as a problem to remove, but as a man who had noticed the one small color no one else had time to see. Helen Moore did not thank Thomas. She did not apologize. She stood beside Noah's wheelchair with the yellow allergy band between her fingers, the green medication sticker clipped to the chart, and the kind of stillness nurses carry when a room is one wrong breath from becoming an emergency. "No one moves him yet," she said. "No one gives another dose." Patricia Voss stiffened behind the counter. Marvin Cole looked at Mercer, waiting for a signal. Mercer stepped forward with both palms open, his voice warm enough to sound reasonable. "Helen, this is exactly why we avoid allowing distressed family members to influence care in the lobby." Thomas kept his eyes on Noah, not Mercer. The boy's mother clutched Grace's clean towel against her son's forehead, whispering his name like a prayer that had only one word. Grace stood close to Thomas again, one hand gripping the sealed envelope, the torn edge bent from where she had opened the top. She was not crying, but her chin had that tiny tremble Thomas knew from nights when she tried to be brave before asking if her mother had hurt. "Mr. Carter," Helen said, turning back to him, "you understand how this looks?" "Yes, ma'am. You are flagged in our system. I saw. You just directed care for a child who is not yours." Thomas lowered his gaze for half a second, then lifted it again. "I asked you to check a wristband." The answer was so plain that even Marvin's jaw shifted, as if he had expected anger and found a locked door instead. Helen looked down at the envelope. "Let me see the line after room 314. Mercer moved first. Not fast enough to look guilty, just fast enough to be noticed. "Any document allegedly from Dr. Hart should be reviewed by administration before being read aloud." "Allegedly?" Grace whispered. The word sounded too big and too cold in her mouth. Thomas touched her shoulder with 2 fingers. "It means they need to check." Helen held out her hand, not to Thomas, but to Grace. "May I?" Grace looked at her father. Thomas nodded. The child passed over the envelope with both hands, as if handing over something. "Breakable." Helen unfolded the first sheet under the fluorescent light. The paper made a dry, nervous sound. At the top was Dr. Evelyn Hart's name, the hospital letterhead, and a line written in blue ink beneath the printed text. Compare medication order, pharmacy pull slip, pump log, same drift as Carter case. Patricia's face closed. Mercer's smile did not leave, but it became thinner. "That phrase is meaningless without context," he said. A surgeon under stress may write things that feel urgent but aren't operationally useful. Thomas did not argue. He reached for a blank visitor envelope from the counter, turned it over, and drew 3 columns with Grace's pencil. Order time, pull time, pump time. His hands were rough. The nails darkened faintly from old grease despite being washed clean. Just check the first 2, he said. Nothing private. No diagnosis. No name. Just time. Helen hesitated. It was a fair hesitation. The red flag on the tablet was real. Thomas's grief was real. Mercer's title was real. And yet the yellow band and the green sticker sat in front of her like 2 witnesses disagreeing. She turned to a junior nurse. Print the de-identified medication order and the pharmacy pull slip for P314. No patient name. Patricia objected immediately. That requires authorization. Helen did not look away from the chart. I'm authorizing a safety check. The small printer behind the desk began to chatter. The sound filled the lobby, thin and mechanical, while Noah's mother rocked in place beside the wheelchair. A strip of paper curled out, then another. Helen took them, scanned once, and stopped. Thomas watched her eyes move back to the top line. Medication order signed at 6:42 p.m. Pharmacy pull slip printed at 6:31 p.m., 11 minutes before the order existed. Slips print late all the time, Mercer said softly. Thomas looked at him. Late wouldn't be before. For the first time, Mercer said nothing. Helen held the 2 papers apart under the white light, as if distance might make the numbers behave. Then the phone at the pharmacy station rang, and when the nurse answered, her expression changed. They say the original pull slip was reconciled this morning, she said slowly, by risk management. Thomas looked at the torn envelope in Grace's hands, then at Mercer's polished badge, and understood that the first loose thread had not come from the medicine cart at all. Risk management. The words settled over the ER lobby with the quiet weight of a locked door. Thomas did not look at Daniel Mercer first. He looked at Helen more because the next choice belonged to her, not to him. Helen held the medication order in one hand and the pharmacy pull slip in the other, the 2 timestamps refusing to line up beneath the fluorescent light. Mercer stepped closer, voice softened to the shape of concern. Helen, before this turns into a public misunderstanding, let me take these upstairs and reconcile them properly. They were already reconciled, Thomas said. That's the problem. Marvin Cole gave a short breath through his nose, almost a laugh. Now the mechanic is auditing the hospital. Thomas turned just enough to face him. No. The clock is. The sentence was so simple that it stole some of the room's noise. A chair leg stopped scraping across the tile. The television above the waiting area kept moving, but no one watched it. Helen set both papers flat on the counter and pressed 2 fingers against them as if to keep them from disappearing. Bring me a clean scanner, she told the junior nurse, and have Biomed bring a pump from the same model family as room 314. Not from the room. A hallway unit. Mercer's smile tightened at the edges. That is unnecessary theater. It's a safety check, Helen said. In my lobby. With no patient name. Grace leaned against Thomas's side, her small shoulder warmer now beneath his denim jacket. He felt her breathing slow a little, not because she understood the test, but because for the first time an adult in a uniform had not told her father to be quiet. A biomedical technician arrived pushing a gray infusion pump on a rolling pole, its wheels squeaking softly over the polished floor. The machine was ordinary, scuffed at the corners, a strip of old adhesive still stuck near the screen. Thomas saw the sticker before he touched anything. Service date, model number, firmware line. He did not reach for the buttons. He kept both hands visible. You can run it, he said to the technician. Scan a test med, start a dummy infusion. Then compare the scanner time to the pump log and billing time. Marvin folded his arms. Convenient that you know all this. Thomas looked at the machine, not at Marvin. I repair equipment people only notice after it fails. Helen nodded to the technician. The scanner beeped once, sharp and sterile. The pump accepted the dummy line. The small screen glowed blue. Somewhere behind the ER doors, A monitor chirped in a rhythm that made Noah's mother close her eyes and hold Grace's towel tighter. The technician printed the test log. Paper curled out in a narrow white tongue. Helen took it first, then placed it on the counter where everyone could see the times without seeing any patient record. Scanner time, billing time, pump time. The difference was not dramatic enough for a movie. It was worse because it was ordinary. 7 minutes, 43 seconds. Small enough to be explained away by a busy shift. Large enough to put a medicine in the wrong order under the wrong assumption with the wrong confidence. Mercer exhaled slowly. Minor device drift. It happens. This does not mean room 314 is in danger. Thomas did not strike back with the number. He did not say "I told you so." He looked toward Noah's mother and lowered his voice. Then holding one dose until the room unit is checked shouldn't hurt anyone. Helen's hand came down on the test log, not hard but final. Hold the next dose for P314 until pharmacy verifies by hand. Mercer turned to her. Don't call Biomed yet. The words came out too fast. He corrected himself almost instantly. I mean, don't escalate this in front of families. We don't want public panic. But the first sentence had already entered the air. Helen picked up the test log, folded it once, and slid it under the edge of Dr. Hart's letter to keep the papers together. Then she looked at the technician. Pull the service history on room 314's pump. Full log. Firmware updates included. The technician swallowed, tapped his tablet, and waited as the hospital system spun under the weak lobby. Wi-Fi. Grace watched the loading circle turn and turn, her fingers still curled around the torn envelope. When the file opened, the technician's face changed before he said a word. This firmware, he murmured, should have been patched 6 months ago. Thomas closed his eyes for one heartbeat, because 6 months ago was not just a date on a service screen. It was the month his wife died. 6 months ago was the month Thomas Carter had learned that grief could have fluorescent edges, could smell like antiseptic and burned coffee, could sound like a monitor going steady and then not steady at all. He opened his eyes to the lobby again, to the infusion pump on its rolling pole, to Grace pressed against his side, to Helen Moore staring at the technician's tablet as if the screen had just widened into a hallway she had never meant to walk down. Show me the service history, Helen said. Her voice was quiet, but it made the young technician stand straighter. The tablet refreshed. Lines of maintenance notes appeared, each one clean and brief, the kind of language built to make danger look tidy. Firmware update recommended. No action needed. Follow-up deferred. Thomas reached into the back pocket of his worn jeans and pulled out a folded paper, soft at the creases from months of being carried, opened, doubted, and folded again. It was not dramatic. It was not stamped confidential. It was a repair receipt from a subcontracted biomedical equipment call, with his signature at the bottom and a work order number printed across the top. He placed it beside Dr. Hart's letter and did not push it toward anyone. I filed that before my wife died, he said. Mercer gave a gentle sigh, the kind meant to sound patient. A scrap of paper from a former contractor does not establish hospital liability. The technician leaned closer before Thomas could answer. That's not a scrap, he murmured. That's our work order format. Helen turned the receipt with 2 fingers. The number matched the service history on the tablet. Same model family. Same firmware note. Same warning deferred. For a moment, the printer behind the counter stopped humming, and the sudden absence of sound felt almost holy. Grace looked at the receipt, then at the old hospital tag tucked inside her father's notebook. She did not know what firmware meant. She knew what before meant. She knew her mother had died after something her father had tried to fix had been left unfixed. Thomas saw her face and put his hand over the notebook, not to hide the truth, but to keep the room from taking another piece of her childhood without permission. How long before Noah's next dose? He asked. Helen looked up sharply. Not at Mercer. At the charge nurse near the ER doors. Check. The nurse disappeared through the double doors. Mercer's jaw moved once before his smile returned. Helen, we should pause. This is no longer appropriate for the lobby. Mr. Carter is clearly reliving a traumatic event, and his daughter should not be exposed to this. Thomas looked at him, and there was no anger in his face, which somehow made the words heavier. My wife is gone. That boy isn't. Start there. No one answered immediately. Then Thomas's old phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. A low buzzing sound against denim. Grace flinched because the room was too quiet for small noises. Thomas took it out and saw the voicemail icon glowing over an unknown hospital extension. Time received, 6:08 a.m. The morning Dr. Evelyn Hart died. Helen saw the number. Mercer saw it too, and for the first time, his hand went to his own phone as if checking whether a door had been left unlocked somewhere. Thomas did not play it loud. He looked at Helen first. You should hear this, he said. Helen nodded once. The voicemail crackled with static. Then Dr. Hart's tired voice filled the space between them. Mr. Carter, if I don't make the meeting, ask Helen Moore to compare the order, the pull, and the pump. You reported it before the Carter event. I signed the silence. I am trying not to die with it. The message ended with a breath, a click, and nothing. Helen's face changed slowly, not into pity, but into responsibility. She folded the receipt under the letter, placed the test log on top, and told the nurse returning from the ER, hold Noah's dose. Lock the pump. Pharmacy verifies by hand. The nurse swallowed. He was due in 8 minutes. Mercer stepped closer, his voice lower now. Helen, we can handle this upstairs. She looked at the papers lying under the harsh white light, then at the camera dome above the lobby desk, then at Thomas standing still with his daughter under his old denim jacket. No, she said. Not upstairs. Not behind a closed door. The lobby of St. Bartholomew Medical Center had changed without moving an inch. The same plastic chairs lined the wall. The same coffee machine clicked weakly near the vending alcove. The same fluorescent lights hummed above the billing counter. But now every sound seemed to know it was being witnessed. Helen Moore ordered a portable privacy screen placed around Noah's mother and son, not to hide them, but to protect them from becoming part of the spectacle. Then she laid the evidence on the counter in a careful line. Dr. Hart's letter, the de-identified medication order, the pharmacy pull slip, the scanner test log, Thomas's repair receipt, and the phone with the voicemail paused at the final second. Thomas stood 2 steps back with Grace under his denim jacket, his hands empty, his face tired in a way no victory could fix. Marvin Cole no longer held him, but he stayed close enough to remind everyone that power had not fully changed sides yet. Mercer took the center of the lobby with a calmness that almost worked. Everyone, he said, voice warm and practiced. What you are seeing is a routine internal safety review being interrupted by a grieving family member. There is no confirmed patient harm. There is no need for alarm. And there is certainly no basis for public accusations. A few people in the waiting area shifted, relieved by the rhythm of authority. Patricia Voss nodded too quickly behind her tablet. Mercer continued, Dr. Hart was a respected surgeon, but she was under significant emotional stress. Mr. Carter's history with this hospital makes him vulnerable to seeing patterns where there may only be coincidence. For one moment, it looked as though he had put the lid back on the room. Then Grace, still half hidden beneath Thomas's jacket, held up the torn envelope with both hands. It says to ask for Helen, she said softly, not loudly, not bravely in a grown-up way, just like a child repeating the instruction she had been trusted to remember. Helen looked at the envelope again. On the second page, beneath the line about room 314, Dr. Hart had written in blue ink, if they ask for a closed room, hold your father's hand and ask for Helen. Helen's jaw tightened, but she still did not let emotion outrun evidence. Mr. Mercer, she said, you said this was routine. Then we will verify it routinely. She pointed to the first document. Letter from Dr. Hart, naming room 314 and a 3-part crosscheck. She moved to the next. Medication order signed at 6:42. Her finger shifted. Pharmacy pull slip at 6:31. Mercer raised a hand. Pharmacy reconciliation can create unusual print sequences. Late printouts don't travel backward, Thomas said. The words were quiet, and because they were quiet, they reached farther. Helen continued. Scanner test showed a 7-minute, 43-second drift on the same model family. Mercer smiled faintly, as if forgiving a misunderstanding. A hallway unit, not the patient's unit. Which is why I asked for the service history, Helen replied. The biomedical technician lifted his tablet with both hands, visibly uncomfortable. Room 314's pump shows the same firmware line. Patch deferred. Mercer turned, just slightly, blocking the nearest camera dome with his shoulder. Thomas noticed. So did Helen. Please step away from the camera line, she said. Mercer's eyes flickered. Helen, this is not a courtroom. Thomas looked at the counter, at the papers that had begun as scraps and were becoming a map. No, he said. It's where you called me dangerous. The lobby stilled again. Helen picked up Thomas's repair receipt. This work order number matches the hospital's service log. Patricia leaned forward. That receipt was never approved for action. Helen looked at her. How would billing know that? Patricia's mouth opened, then closed.
Mercer stepped in fast.
Because risk management reviewed all Carter-related materials after the incident. After? Thomas asked. His eyes moved to the phone, then to the old hospital tag in his notebook. Then why did Dr. Hart say I reported it before? The question did not accuse. It simply stood there, impossible to escort out. Helen turned toward the security desk. Pull the lobby camera from 6:03 this morning and the visitor log for external consults. Mercer's voice dropped. That footage may include protected information. Helen did not blink. The 2 Thursday staff hallway is not a patient room. The security clerk swallowed, typed, and the wall monitor behind the desk flickered from hospital announcements to grainy morning footage. Grace's fingers found Thomas's hand. On the screen, Dr. Evelyn Hart appeared alone under dim hallway lights, carrying the white envelope that now lay torn on the counter. She placed it into the nurse's mail slot, paused, then turned back toward the camera as if she had known the room would one day need one last witness. On the wall monitor, Dr. Evelyn Hart turned back toward the camera and lifted something small into the dim hallway light. The image was grainy, blue-gray and silent, but Thomas knew the shape before the security clerk zoomed in. A hospital tag. Clouded plastic. Faded print. The same kind tucked inside his notebook, except this one had not been in his home. Not in his hands, not in Grace's memory box. Helen Moore leaned closer to the screen. The lobby seemed to lean with her. The zoom sharpened enough for one name to appear beneath the glare. Mary Carter. Grace's fingers tightened around Thomas's hand. Mom, she whispered, not as a question, but as if the room had suddenly given back a word it had stolen. Daniel Mercer did not move. His face held its shape for 1 second too long. Then something in it emptied. Helen turned from the monitor to him. Why was Mary Carter's tag in risk management storage? Mercer swallowed. His answer came dry. Legacy files sometimes contain retained materials. Family identifiers are not retained in risk files unless they are evidence, Helen said. The word evidence changed the room. It moved through the people in the chairs, through Patricia Voss behind the tablet, through Marvin Cole standing near Thomas without touching him now. The television still played above them, muted and bright, but no one looked up. Behind the privacy screen, Noah's mother murmured to her son, and the small sound of her voice was the only human thing brave enough to continue. Then the ER doors opened. A pediatric nurse stepped into the lobby, one hand still on the doorframe. Helen, she said, breathless but steady. Noah's stable. Pharmacy stopped the prepared dose. The replacement protocol is working. The mother behind the screen made a sound that was almost a sob and almost a prayer. Thomas closed his eyes for one heartbeat. Not relief for himself. Not victory. Just the quiet, unbearable mercy of a child still being alive. Helen placed Dr. Hart's letter on the counter, then the pharmacy pull slip, the pump drift test, the service log, Thomas's repair receipt, the voicemail phone, and finally the paused camera still of Dr. Hart holding Mary Carter's tag. One by one, the scraps became a chain. One by one, the chain became something no title could soften. Mercer tried once more. "This is exposure," he said, and the moment the word left him, he seemed to hear it too. Not safety, not patience, exposure. Helen's eyes did not leave his face. "Mr. Mercer, your access to active medication risk files is suspended pending independent review. Security will not remove Mr. Carter. Data security will preserve the footage. Pharmacy will preserve all records for room 314 and the Carter case." Patricia's tablet slipped slightly against the counter with a dull plastic tap. Marvin looked at Thomas, then down at the hand he had used to grip the old denim jacket. "Sir," Marvin said, and could not find the rest. The lobby went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that made the automatic doors sound like breathing, that made the fluorescent lights seem too loud, that made a sheet of paper settling on the counter feel like a gavel. Grace leaned against Thomas, her cheek against his sleeve. He did not point at Mercer. He did not raise his voice. He did not say the words everyone expected from a man who had just been dragged, accused, and proven right. He only looked at Helen and said, "Map the failure before another child is dosed." Helen nodded, not with pity, but with respect. "Can you help us do that?" Thomas looked at the screen where Dr. Hart's last witness still glowed in frozen light, then at his daughter, whose small hand still held the torn envelope that had started it all. "I'll help," he said, "but not in a closed room." And as the whole lobby stood unable to speak, the question was no longer whether Thomas Carter had told the truth, but what a man with that much pain would choose to do now that the truth had finally given him power. The crowd did not break apart all at once. It loosened slowly, like people waking from a hard dream and remembering how to move. Chairs scraped softly. A mother gathered a diaper bag from the floor. Someone near the vending machines wiped his eyes and pretended to read a text. Marvin Cole stepped away from Thomas as if distance itself could apologize, while 2 data security officers arrived to preserve the lobby footage, the visitor log, the medication records, and every timestamp that had tried to hide inside ordinary hospital language. Daniel Mercer was escorted not by force, but by procedure, which somehow felt more final. His badge was deactivated at the security desk with a small electronic beep. Patricia Voss sat behind the counter, pale and silent, her tablet face down now, the red risk flag no longer a weapon but evidence. Helen Moore did not make a speech in the lobby. She protected Noah first. She sent his mother back behind the privacy screen with a pediatric nurse, a corrected chart, and a promise written in actions, not comfort words. Only when Noah was stable, only when the prepared dose was sealed, only when the pump from room 314 was tagged and removed from service, did Helen lead Thomas and Grace upstairs to the glass-walled conference room overlooking the ER entrance. The same lobby lay beneath them, bright and clean and changed. On the table, the evidence looked smaller than the damage it had carried. Dr. Hart's torn envelope, Thomas's repair receipt, the test log, the visitor record, his old phone, the frozen still of Mary Carter's hospital tag, and the notebook with Grace's pencil resting across it. A hospital attorney began listing next steps, but Helen raised one hand. "First," she said, "we correct the record." The red flag beside Thomas Carter's name was removed. Carter case was no longer marked disruptive. It was marked for independent review. Mercer was suspended pending investigation. Patricia would give a statement about the misuse of the risk flag. Marvin stood in the doorway for a long moment before walking in, shoulders lowered. He looked at Thomas, then at Grace. "I should have verified the letter before I touched your father," he said. Grace stayed half behind Thomas, safe enough to listen, young enough not to have to forgive on command. Thomas only nodded. Boundaries could be quiet too. Helen slid a fresh document across the table. Medication Safety Crosscheck Protocol. 3 required confirmations before high-risk pediatric medication. Physician order, pharmacy pull, pump log. No single office could reconcile all 3 alone. No risk department could bury a device report without independent sign-off. Thomas read the lines slowly, the way he read service manuals, looking for the place where a life could slip through. Then he opened his notebook and removed Mary's faded hospital tag. For years, that tag had been proof of a door closed in his face. Now it lay under the conference room lights like a small, wounded truth finally allowed to breathe. Put her name on the rule, Thomas said. Not mine. Helen's expression shifted, not into pity, but respect. Mary Carter Pediatric Medication Safety Rule, she said. I'll put it before the board tonight. Noah's mother came in just before sunset, exhausted, hair loose from its clip, eyes red but steady. She did not fall apart. She simply knelt so Grace would not have to look up too high and said, Your daddy gave my son a second chance. Grace looked at Thomas. Did Mom help save him? Thomas swallowed, then brushed one thumb over the edge of the torn envelope still in her hand. Yes, sweetheart, he said. She finally got heard. Later, when they walked back through the ER lobby, no one clapped. That would have been too easy, too loud for what had happened there. Instead, the clerk opened the door without being asked. A nurse lowered her eyes in respect. Marvin stepped aside. Helen walked with Thomas not as a guard, not as a handler, but as someone who had seen the evidence and the man behind it. The toolbox in Thomas's hand no longer looked like proof that he did not belong. It looked like the reason he had noticed what others missed. Outside, rain had stopped on the hospital glass, and Grace slipped her hand into his as they crossed the wet pavement. Behind them, the lobby settled into a different silence now, not the silence of shock, but the silence of people understanding that dignity does not need to raise its voice. Sometimes it only waits, steady and kind, until truth becomes strong enough to open the door.